Duane Couture is an American actor, retired mixed martial artist, and a former collegiate and Greco-Roman wrestler. During his tenures in the Ultimate Fighting Championship, Couture became a three-time UFC Heavyweight Champion, two-time UFC Light Heavyweight Champion, an Interim UFC Light Heavyweight Champion, and was the UFC 13 Heavyweight Tournament winner. Couture is the first of only two fighters to hold two UFC Championship titles in two different divisions. Couture has competed in a record 15 title fights. He holds the most title reigns in the UFC with 5. His last fight with Lyoto Machida marked his 24th fight in the UFC, the third largest number of fights in the UFC. Couture is the fourth member of the UFC Hall of Fame. He is the only person over the age of 40 to have won a UFC championship fight, having done so 4 times. Couture was an Olympic wrestling alternate and has lived in Corvallis, Oregon, throughout much of his career, where he served as an assistant wrestling coach and a strength and conditioning coach for Oregon State University. He established Team Quest with Matt Lindland and Dan Henderson, a training camp for fighters, based out of Gresham, Oregon, and headed by coach Robert Foles. In 2005, Couture moved to Las Vegas, where he opened his own extensive chain of gyms under the name Extreme Couture. Couture partnered with Baz Rutten to open Legends Gym in Hollywood, California. Couture is generally recognized as a clinch and ground and pound fighter who uses his wrestling ability to execute takedowns, establish top position and successively strike the opponent on the bottom. Couture has displayed a variety of skills in boxing and catch wrestling and has submitted 4 opponents using different chokeholds. Couture is the only athlete in UFC history to win a championship after becoming a Hall of Fame member and is the oldest title holder ever in the UFC and MMA. Early life: Couture was born in Everett, Washington, the son of Sharon Amelia and Edward Louis Ed Couture. He wrestled at Alderwood Middle School in Linwood, Washington, then moved on to Linwood High School, where he won a state championship during his senior year in wrestling. He served in the U.S. Army from 1982 to 1988, attaining the rank of sergeant in the 101st Airborne, where he wrestled and did a little boxing. While he was in the Army he applied for tryouts with the U.S. Army Freestyle Wrestling Team. However, due to a clerical error his application was sent to the Greco-Roman tryouts and rather than wait until the next year he decided to pursue it. Despite never having competed in Greco-Roman he made the team. Upon discharge, Couture became a 3-time Olympic team alternate, a semi-finalist at the 2000 Olympic trials, a 3-time NCAA Division I All-American and a 2-time NCAA Division I runner-up at Oklahoma State University. In 1992, he was the Division I runner-up at 190 pounds, coming in second after Mark Kerr. He was working as a wrestling coach at Oregon State University when he decided to compete in MMA. Mixed martial arts career, Ultimate Fighting Championship and rings. Couture made his professional mixed martial arts debut at UFC 13 in May 1997, as part of a 4-man heavyweight tournament. His first opponent was Tony Harm, who outweighed him by nearly 100 lbs. Couture immediately hit a double leg takedown and, after some ground and pound, moved to back mount and secured a rear naked choke submission to win in under a minute. In the tournament final, he defeated Stephen Graham, another larger opponent, by TKO at 3:13 into the first round. On October 17, 1997, at UFC 15, Couture fought Vitor Belfort to determine the number 1 contender for the UFC Heavyweight Championship. Couture was an underdog, as 19-year-old Belfort was the UFC 12 Heavyweight Tournament champion, winning all of his matches with devastating punches. After circling away from Belfort's left hand, Couture got the clinch. The fighters broke up and, when Belfort attempted a flurry of punches, Couture hit a takedown. He immediately gained side control and landed strikes. As Belfort scrambled to his feet, Couture landed knee strikes. He clinched again and wore Belfort down with dirty boxing. By the 7-minute mark, Belfort was exhausted. Couture again took him down, and finished him with punches from back mount, for one of the biggest upsets in MMA at the time. At UFC Japan on December 21, Couture challenged the UFC Heavyweight Champion, Maurice Smith, to his second title defense since winning the belt from Mark Coleman earlier that year. It was a slow-paced fight, and neither fighter significantly damaged the other, but Couture hit several takedowns and held positional control throughout the fight. After 21 minutes, he won a majority decision and became the new UFC Heavyweight Champion. In 1998, UFC matchmakers wanted Couture to defend the belt against Bas Rutten, former king of Pan-Rays. Randy instead signed with Bell Judo Japan, and was stripped of the title. In Japan, he faced Enson Inoue. After taking the fight to the ground, Couture tapped out to an armor, just over 90 seconds into the bout. His next fight was against Mikhail Alukhin on March 20, 1999, in rings. He submitted to a Kimura. After that loss, he took a break from MMA to focus on his amateur wrestling career. Couture returned to MMA in October 2000, for the Rings King of Kings Tournament 2000. He won a unanimous decision over UFC veteran Jeremy Horn in his first fight, and then another over Pan-Rays veteran Ryoshi Nagizawa. These two wins qualified him for the final event of the tournament, in March 2001. Before that, he was offered a shot at the UFC Heavyweight Championship against Kevin Randleman on November 17, 2000. He was taken down in the first 2 rounds, but defended well from his back, negating most of Randleman's ground and pound attempts. In the 3rd round, he tripped Randleman to the mat and landed several strikes from full mount for a TKO victory and his second UFC Heavyweight Championship. In March 2001, Couture continued in the Rings King of Kings Tournament 2000 final. After dominating UFC veteran Tsuyoshi Kosaka in the first fight, he submitted to a guillotine choke by Valentij Overeem. Antonio Rodrigo Nogueira won the tournament, and Couture returned to the UFC. His first title defense was against Brazilian kickboxer Pedro Rizzo, at UFC 31. This was the first UFC event under Zuffa management, with Dana White as the new president. Both fighters inflicted substantial damage. After 5 5-minute rounds, Couture won a close unanimous decision. Some fans felt Rizzo had won, so the UFC set up an immediate rematch for UFC 34, in November 2001. This time, Couture won decisively by TKO in the 3rd round. His 3rd title defense was in March 2002, against up-and-comer Josh Barnett. In the 2nd round, Barnett mounted Couture and landed several strikes to win the title by TKO. After the fight, it was revealed Barnett had tested positive for anabolic steroids. He was subsequently stripped of the title and cut from the UFC. Couture then faced Rico Rodriguez for the vacant UFC Heavyweight Championship at UFC 39, in late 2002. After dominating the first 3 rounds, 39-year-old Couture became noticeably fatigued. In the 5th round, Rodriguez took him down and landed an elbow strike to his orbital bone, breaking it and making him submit. This was the first time a UFC fight had finished in the 5th round. Moved to light heavyweight and trilogy with Chuck Liddell. After 2 consecutive losses to larger opponents in the heavyweight division, Couture moved down to the light heavyweight division. In his light heavyweight debut, he fought longtime number 1 contender Chuck Liddell for the UFC Interim Light Heavyweight Championship. He was again the underdog but, after outstriking Liddell for 3 rounds, took the fight to the ground and won by TKO via strikes from full mount, becoming the only UFC fighter to win titles in 2 weight classes. His next match, against 5-time defending champion Tito Ortiz, was billed as a champion versus champion fight. 40-year-old Couture won a unanimous decision to become the undisputed UFC Light Heavyweight Champion. Couture's first title defense was against Vitor Belfort, whom he had previously defeated in 1997 at UFC 15. In the first round, as Couture closed the distance to attempt to clinch, Belfort grazed his right eye with a left hook. His glove opened a cut, and Belfort was declared the winner when the cage-side doctor advised the fight be stopped. A rubber match took place later that year. Couture dominated all 3 rounds before winning by doctor's stoppage due to a cut, and became a 2-time UFC Light Heavyweight Champion. On April 16, 2005, in a rematch with Liddell, Couture lost his title and suffered the first knockout loss of his career. He came back in August to defeat Mike Van Arsdale and re-establish himself as a top contender. He faced Liddell for the 3rd and final time in a championship match at UFC 57, on February 4, 2006. He was knocked out in the 2nd round and, immediately afterwards, announced his retirement from MMA. On June 24, 2006, on the Ultimate Fighter 3 finale, Couture became the 4th inductee to the UFC Hall of Fame, joining Royce Gracie, Dan Severn, and Ken Shamrock. Retirement: after retiring from MMA, Couture became a regular broadcast commentator for UFC events and co-host of Before the Bell and After the Bell on the Fight Network. He appeared in the Rob Schneider movie Big Stan, with fellow mixed martial artists Don Frye and Bob Sapp. On November 17, 2006, Couture fought and drew with Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu champion Ronaldo Jaquer Souza in a submission wrestling contest. After the match, Couture invited Souza to train at his gym. Souza accepted and started training at Extreme Couture in Las Vegas. Couture was featured in the Season 2 premiere episode of the Spike TV show Pros vs. Joes, which aired January 25, 2007. His teammates on the episode were Michael Irvin, Kevin Willis, and Jose Copyright Canseco. He returned for the finale, where he took part in a football-based round. His teammates were Willis, Randall Cunningham, Bruce Smith, Roy Jones Jr. and Tim Hardaway. Reclaiming the heavyweight title. On January 11, 2007, Couture announced his return from retirement in an interview on the Spike TV magazine show, Inside the UFC. In a conversation with Joe Rogan, he confirmed he would face Tim Sylvia for the UFC Heavyweight Championship at UFC 68, on March 3, 2007. He also announced he had signed a 4-fight, 2-year deal with the UFC. At the age of 43, Couture defeated Sylvia by unanimous decision to become UFC Heavyweight Champion for a 3rd time. Couture's first punch, 8 seconds into the fight, sent the 6'8" in Sylvia to the mat. He controlled the pace of the fight for 5 rounds, smothering Sylvia with strikes and numerous takedowns. All 3 judges scored the bout 50-45 for Couture. At UFC 74 on August 25, 2007, Couture successfully defended the title against Brazilian Gabriel Gonzaga, defeating him via TKO by strikes. Couture suffered a broken left arm when he blocked one of Gonzaga's kicks. The kick cleanly split his ulna, requiring him to wear a splint for 6 weeks. Resignation and dispute with the UFC. On October 11, 2007, Couture announced he was severing all ties with the UFC, leaving 2 contracted fights, a position as an on-air analyst and the UFC Heavyweight Championship behind. He received $250,000 for his comeback fight with Tim Sylvia. He received a $250,000 purse for defeating Gabriel Gonzaga. He complained Chuck Liddell was allegedly paid more than he was, despite losing his previous 2 fights. Couture cited the UFC's failure to sign number 1 ranked heavyweight fighter Fedor Emelianenko, as well as disputes with UFC management, for his decision. On October 18, 2007, UFC President Dana White said Couture remained the UFC Heavyweight Champion despite his plans to quit, and reiterated he would not release Couture from the final 2 fights on his contract. Couture held a press conference on October 25, 2007, where he denied his departure from UFC was a retirement, set forth his grievances about his pay, and reiterated his belief that he would be free from any contractual obligations to the UFC after 9 months. On October 30, 2007, White and Zuffa CEO Lorenzo Fertitta held another press conference, where White reiterated the UFC's position of 12 days prior, and released documents refuting Couture's claims about the pay he received. White and Couture had a good conversation at UFC 78. They met again on Thanksgiving weekend to discuss a possible UFC return, but Couture said he had no desire to do so at the time. cornering some of his fighters from Extreme Couture at HDNET Fights on December 15 in Dallas, Texas. Couture answered questions about Fedor Emelianenko, stating that he would like to fight him in October, once his UFC contract expired, if the UFC could not come to a co-promotion agreement with Russia's M1 Global beforehand. On January 15, 2008, Zuffa filed a lawsuit in Clark County District Court in Nevada, citing breach of contract and irreparable damage, seeking over $10,000 in damages. This suit only concerned Couture's employment contract and not his promotional contract. On February 28, 2008, Judge Jennifer Togliatti handed down the first ruling in the case, issuing a preliminary injunction barring Couture from participating in an IFL event held the following day. On August 2, 2008, a Texas appeals court granted Zuffa's request for a stay against a motion for a declaratory judgment in a suit filed by HDNET regarding Couture's contractual status with the UFC. The stay effectively ended the dispute in the state of Texas, and Zuffa was allowed to move forward with the Nevada suit. Return to the UFC. On September 2, 2008, the UFC announced it had signed Couture a new 3-fight contract. On November 15, he returned at UFC 91 in Las Vegas, Nevada, where he lost the UFC Heavyweight Championship to Brock Lesnar. At first a closely contested match, Lesnar knocked Couture down in the second round and struck him with hammerfists for a TKO victory at 3:07. In a post-fight interview with Joe Rogan, Couture declared his desire to keep fighting and said he felt he was still becoming a better fighter, blaming the loss on his performance, not his age. On August 29, 2009, Couture faced former UFC Interim Heavyweight Champion and former Pride Heavyweight Champion Antonio Rodrigo Nogueira at UFC 102 in Portland, Oregon, and lost a unanimous decision. After the bout, Couture stated he felt he was in the best shape of his life, and would wait and see what the UFC had in store for him. The fight received the Fight of the Night award. Returned to light heavyweight and retirement. After the Nogueira loss, Couture signed a new 6-fight deal, which superseded his previous contract. On November 14, 2009, at UFC 105, Couture faced Brandon Vera. Vera landed effective strikes and scored a takedown, but Couture won a somewhat controversial unanimous decision. The fight was his first at light heavyweight since losing to Chuck Liddell in 2006. With the win, the 46-year-old Couture became the oldest fighter to win a UFC bout. Couture fought fellow UFC Hall of Famer Mark Coleman at UFC 109. The bout marked the first time UFC Hall of Famers fought each other in the UFC. They were scheduled to meet at UFC 17 in 1998, but an injury to Couture forced the cancellation of the bout. They wrestled each other in a freestyle match at the 1989 Olympic Festival at Oklahoma State University. Coleman won the match by 1 point. Couture modified his training for this bout, focusing on catch wrestling and refining his boxing under coach Gil Martinez. The combined age of these fighters is the highest in any UFC match. Couture made Coleman pass out to a rear naked choke submission in the second round, getting his first submission win in over 4 years. Couture was scheduled to fight Rich Franklin at UFC 115, but Franklin instead fought Chuck Liddell, replacing Liddell's original opponent, Tito Ortiz. Couture instead faced 3-time boxing world champion James Toney at UFC 118. Couture dominated Toney, taking him down and mounting him within seconds, and quickly making him submit to an arm triangle choke. Many felt that this fight had been made as an attempt to repair damage done to the credibility of MMA after Ray Mercer knocked out former UFC heavyweight champion Tim Sylvia. Couture had stated he was interested in fighting either Lyoto Machida or Morikawa Rua. Since Rua had an upcoming title defense against John Jones, UFC matchmakers gave him Machida. They fought on April 30, 2011, at UFC 129, before 55,000 fans in Toronto. Couture had stated before the bout it would be his final fight. Machida knocked him out in the second round with a jumping front kick. After the fight, Couture announced he was finally done fighting, at the age of 47. Bellator Fighting Championships. On January 29, 2013, Couture signed with Bellator to be a coach the first season of their reality show, Fight Master, Bellator MMA, which debuted in June 2013. Couture also did commentary for Bellator 96. Acting. Couture made a cameo appearance on the season finale of the CBS show The Unit, as a military guard. He played fight commentator Terry Flynn in the film Red Belt. He appeared on an episode of the History Channel show Human Weapon on September 27, 2007, and starred in the 2008 film The Scorpion King 2, Rise of a Warrior. He played Toll Road in the 2010 movie The Expendables and reprised the role in the 2012 sequel. He did several public service announcements, one against crystal meth. He starred alongside 50 Cent and Bruce Willis in the 2011 film, Set Up, as an enforcer named Petty. In 2012, he played the leading role of hard-bitten cop Paul Ross in Brandon Knott's action film Hijacked, alongside Dominic Purcell. Personal life. Couture was previously married to Sharon, Tricia, and Kim Couture. He and Kim filed for divorce in May 2009. He continued to coach her and support her MMA career. He has 3 children, sons Ryan and Caden, and daughter Amy. He was asked if MMA could be improved and mentioned in response health insurance, retirement plans as well as more equal compensation regarding other athletes and sports. He lives in Las Vegas. Championships and accomplishments. Greco-Roman Wrestling, Pan American Games, Pan American Championship Greco-Roman Seniors 90 kg Euro 2nd place, Pan American Championship Greco-Roman Seniors 90 kg Euro winner, Pan American Championship Greco-Roman Seniors 90 kg Euro 2nd place, Pan American Championship Greco-Roman Seniors 97 kg Euro 3rd place, Pan American Championship Greco-Roman Seniors 97 kg Euro 2nd place, Pan American Games Greco-Roman Seniors 90 kg Euro winner. FILA Wrestling World Championships, FILA Test Tournament Greco-Roman Seniors 97 kg Euro 3rd place, FILA World Cup Greco-Roman Seniors 90 kg Euro 3rd place, FILA World Cup Greco-Roman Seniors 90 kg Euro 3rd place. Collegiate Wrestling, National Collegiate Athletic Association NCAA Division I All-American, NCAA Division I 190 lb/86.4 kg, 6th place out of Oklahoma State University, NCAA Division I 190 lb/86.4 kg, runner-up out of Oklahoma State University, NCAA Division I 190 lb/86.4 kg, runner-up out of Oklahoma State University. Mixed Martial Arts, Black Belt Magazine, 1997 Full Contact Competitor of the Year. George Tragos Luther's Professional Wrestling Hall of Fame, George Tragos Award. Fighting Network Rings, 2000 Rings King of Kings Tournament semi-finalist. Inside Fights, 2009 Fight of the Year, versus Antonio Rodrigo Nogueira on August 29. Ultimate Fighting Championship, UFC Heavyweight Championship, UFC Light Heavyweight Championship, Interim UFC Light Heavyweight Championship, UFC 13 Heavyweight Tournament Champion, Fight of the Night, UFC Hall of Fame, UFC Viewers' Choice Award, winner of the first UFC Hall of Famer vs UFC Hall of Famer bout in UFC history, most championship reigns in UFC history, most championship fights in UFC history, oldest fighter to win a title in UFC history, oldest fighter to defend a title in UFC history, oldest fighter to win a fight in UFC history, first fighter to hold championships in 2 weight classes, first fighter to hold an interim UFC championship, tied for most successful heavyweight title defenses, tied for most consecutive heavyweight title defenses, tied, all-time leader in UFC fight cards headlined. Wrestling Observer Newsletter, 2003 Most Outstanding Fighter, 2007 MMA Most Valuable Fighter, MMA Most Valuable Fighter of the Decade, 2001 Fight of the Year vs Pedro Rizzo on May 4. World MMA Awards, Outstanding Contribution to MMA. ISPY Award, 2007 Best Fighter ISPY Award, nomination. Mixed Martial Arts Record, Filmography, References. External links, Official website for Extreme Couture Mixed Martial Arts, Professional MMA Record for Randy Couture from Shadog, Randy Couture at the Internet Movie Database, Randy Couture Profile at the National Wrestling Hall of Fame, Official UFC Profile, Randy Couture Quotes.